to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Raising Teens Q&A, where we answer your questions about, well, raising teens. I'm always thinking of ways to make what we talk about on this podcast as practical as I can. So I'm really thrilled because this season's Q&A, I'm joined by friend of the podcast, Michelle Mitchell, and we are going to be answering your Q&As together. I like to affectionately refer to Michelle as the Queen of Tweens, as her new book called Tweens was released earlier this year. Hello again, Michelle. Thanks so much for joining me for another Q&A.
Loving it. This is so much fun, this one, Collett. I can't wait.
So this one, Michelle, I know you know, is from a mum who wrote to me last year in the UK, and I answered her question on the podcast last year, and it's this question.
So, for context, this was the question that was asked last year. Hi, Collett. I've just discovered my 14-year-old is buying treats at the shop and then selling them to his friends at school for a profit. While I admire his entrepreneurial spirit, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Do you have any advice? So after tackling this question on a previous Q&A, we said we'd love to hear how this all turned out.
Now, she has come back with an answer, which was fantastic. I was so excited to get her answer back. So my producer, Alec Green, is going to read the question for this episode's Q&A.
Okay, so it's almost a year after we tackled that last question, and just recently this listener reached out again with an update. She said, "Thanks for your response to my email last year and for including it in one of your podcasts, so I thought I'd write with an update. After trying out his business for a few weeks, our son decided to stop. It was quite a lot of work and he wasn't turning much of a profit. However, his brother, who started in grade 7 this year, decided to give it a go himself. He has made quite a business for himself, purchasing candy from online stores and selling it at about a 50% profit. He's even recruited a couple of his friends to help out, and he pays them a share of the profit. It's not been without its challenges. He had someone break into his locker to steal the candy, and he's also had some kids just take it from his stash. However, he's got through these challenges and learnt ways to mitigate the risks. Unfortunately, just today I had a call from the school. They've had complaints about him selling candy and they've asked him to stop, effective immediately. I understand the school's position, but also think it's a shame they don't recognise his entrepreneurial spirit. He's already diversified though, and with another friend he's created a website for an online dropshipping business. I really think he's going places. Thanks again for your advice and for your podcast." Well, thank you so much to you too. We love hearing all your stories and being able to be a part of your village.
So I absolutely loved this answer. The fact that this whole thing flipped on its head in a way. You know, the younger brother looked like the entrepreneurial one, and he probably is because he had some ideas. And then the older brother came along and took on this business idea and ran with it. I know you've got a bit of a story, so tell me your story.
Oh, I just related to this so much because this was me as a kid, and it was. I know that my mother just like so often shook her head, like, "What am I going to do with this kid?" Because I was always trying to sell something or convince someone of some idea, or
Wow.
I was, oh dear, everything from turning my bedroom into an art gallery and inviting all the guests that came to our house to view my art and purchase my art.
Wow.
One day I actually started a vest knitting business. It came about because I had knitted a vest over the Christmas holidays, took it to school. Everyone loved it. So I made this big announcement that I was taking orders. And by the end of the day, for the very low price of their tuck shop money for that day, whatever that was, they were allowed to order a vest. I went home with bucket loads of money, but realised I was in way over my head.
You had all
Not
these vests to knit that were going to take you a lot longer than tuck shop money.
It just wasn't going to happen. And I remember feeling so guilty, and I remember feeling so scared to tell my parents. And all our listeners can debate their response all they want. But guess what my parents did?
What?
They said, "Michelle, I just can't believe so many kids loved your vest so much. Well, we better go to Spotlight and buy some knitting needles and some wool and get knitting. And it was my mother who stayed up most of the night to get these vests
Oh,
knitted. And they obviously went to the school, and I'm sure there was
wow.
teachable moments with it. And I'm sure I had my fair share of life lessons that I was, like step too far and this and that. But what I took away from it is I'm actually really good at selling things. And
Yes.
I think
So never mind the knitting. Your selling was fantastic.
exactly right. And my parents said, so kids went hungry all day because your vests were that good? And they were very positive. And I think they were trying to play to my strengths. And I think when kids step over the boundaries and over the lines, we can see it a lot of ways. But one thing I think we need to make sure we're seeing it through is their strengths and what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah.
They're going to make a whole lot of mistakes as they go. And I love the words of this mum because she said, while I admire his spirit, it makes me feel uncomfortable. And that made me smile because every entrepreneur ever makes everyone feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
Everyone in their
Yeah.
family's like, oh, this is a risk that might not pay off. So I really loved it. I loved it.
And I think what's fascinating though is, you and I are both also teachers, and I understand that the school stepped in with the brother and had to
Of
stop
course.
him selling because of people breaking into the
Yeah.
lockers and stealing the lollies and so on. But I don't know. I don't, not every child is like that. Not every child is going to bring something to school. And I wish there was a way we could do it better. I mean, I remember marble season when I was at school. Oh,
Me
I
too.
loved marble season. And you had these brilliant people who would make these boxes with little cutout doors that you had to aim your marbles through. And I can't even remember what the rules were, but all around the oval, you would walk around and everyone had their own little game. And this was the kids in school setting up kind of this marble fair. And it wasn't generated by the adults. The kids did it. And so I get there would have been bullying and older kids stealing younger kids good marbles and so on. But I don't know. I feel like there's so much we could harness when kids do that. And it really reminds me, just in this last episode, I spoke a lot about Peter Benson's sparks. Peter Benson says children want to be known for their sparks.
They do.
And they get discovered between the age of 10 and 20. Isn't that fascinating? And he talks about sparks being that thing that gives you meaning and purpose. It's often an interest or a passion or a gift. And when we see that spark, we have to affirm them. And your mum did that. And it's not like you became the world's best knitter, but look at
Absolutely.
Look at your own business now. I mean, I look at that entrepreneurial spirit in you. That is still in you. And your mother affirmed that spark by, really praising you for what she saw you doing and what she saw other children see in you and recognize you. And that really speaks into where Peter Benson says, rather than focusing on what's wrong with kids and trying to fix them, his work zeroed in what was right with kids and try to support them. And that is what Spark is all about.
I love it. And this is what ended up happening with me after the vest knitting business evolved and ran its course. I don't know how it came about, but my dad and I ended up buying lamingtons wholesale from the local bakery. And every Saturday afternoon, we would literally fill up the whole boot of the car and put the air conditioning on because we live in Queensland, very hot. The chocolate would melt off the lamingtons. But, we'd make it as cool as possible. And I would run house to house and I would sell 50 dozen lamingtons. And then I ended up employing my sister as my first, staff member, sales rep.
That's unbelievable.
And that probably ran its course after a few months when I realized that I was, didn't have the energy to keep doing that every afternoon.
Yeah.
And my dad probably got tired. I mean, he was a hairdresser, so he worked till 12 o'clock. He came home at 12, ate lunch, and we got straight in the car and sold lamingtons all afternoon. So you can see when parents really invest into their kids, they learn about themselves. I think, Collett, two things I want to bring out. it's not always about exactly what your child is doing. It's not necessarily that
Mm.
it's what they're learning about themselves in that moment that's the real value piece.
Yeah.
And the second conversation we want to have with kids that do tend to take risks and push those boundaries is this an ethical idea? Could be an
Yes.
exciting idea, it could be a profitable idea, but it has to tick the box of being ethical. And
Yeah.
there's certain boundaries and rules around school and different things that you need to consider in order to have a successful business.
Yeah. And I think that, looking at Peter Benson Sparks, he names about 10. He said there's really a lot. I think he had got up to over 100. I can't remember exactly, but he says the categories of Spark are creative arts, athletics, learning. So that's your languages, sciences, and so on, reading, helping or serving, spirituality, religion, nature and the environment, living a quality life. So that's someone who's caring and tolerant,
Mm.
animal welfare, and leading. But I hadn't ever actually considered what you just said there now. They need to be something that's ethical. So, yeah, it really celebrating and promoting and loving what our children do and encouraging them in that, as long as there's value and values, it's values driven.
Yeah, and you'd be saying to your child, where's the spark? And then where can you add value in this world?
Yeah,
So what do I have to give? Not
yeah,
just what I have to take or, how much money can I make out of this afternoon, but what do I have to give and contribute? And look, school's probably not set up to be the best and certainly not the only opportunity for kids to, explore this stuff.
no, absolutely.
There's a lot of boundaries around school that doesn't really play into this. So we need to look for avenues at home if we've got a kid that's geared this way.
Yeah. And so if your child is someone who's got a heart for others or heart for animals,
Yeah.
some of those things may not necessarily be on the school ground, on the oval. Those will be something outside. So your Lamingtons didn't happen at school, they happened outside. And you learned lots of other skills out of that. So I think that's the take home.
And what's the take home after that is it always takes parents' effort. Who was in the
Yeah.
car every Saturday afternoon after my dad had worked 5.5 days a week, like he'd work
Yeah.
5 days and then start 4 a.m. Saturday morning, come home at 12, and he was in the car with me all afternoon. And it does take a parent really going the extra mile to see kids stretch their wings into these areas a little bit more, especially when they're a bit unconventional.
Yeah. And I think what you've just said there, I realize it's taken us to this stage in our lives to look back and appreciate what our parents did. So our children are not going to be thanking us.
No.
Thank you so much for driving me around in the hot car with the Lamingtons, or, driving me around to go and pick up animals that needed to go to the shelter or whatever.
Yeah.
They're not going to thank us necessarily, even for the next decade.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is it's going to come out later. And so, yeah.
And it's the thing we talk about, like I'm 50 this year, but it's a thing that we still laugh and talk about is some of these moments where I did these crazy things that my parents somehow sort of accommodated. I've got another funny story for you. You ready for this one?
Yes.
This is not me, but one of my staff's daughter started to get obsessed with horses. She had read a novel about horse riding, and she just got fixated on horses, and she started looking up real estate and she was trying to encourage her parents to move to a place where they could have a ranch so she could have a horse, and it was serious, right? And it went on and on and on, and her older sister started to say, oh, how ridiculous, it's never going to happen, whatever. Anyway, she researched that there was a what's the place that horses stay?
Stables.
No, all of the audience right now is going to be saying it for me. But it's basically a horse club where horses stay, and there's lots of stables and horses. But her dad went and asked if she could volunteer there. And every Saturday afternoon, instead of her dad sitting on the couch after work drinking a beer, guess where he was? In a hot, smelly, stinky horse stable with
Wow.
her his young girl who was obsessed with horses. Now, I don't know how long that's going to last, but she's going to learn a whole lot of things about herself in the meantime.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks so much for coming on to this episode of the Q&A, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you again next time. And thank you for joining Michelle and I for this Q&A. You can find more about Michelle's work at michellemitchell.org. And if you have a question about raising teens, please send them via my Facebook page at Collett Smart or my website at raisingteens.au. Please subscribe and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to see you next episode. And in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adult in mind.
This episode was hosted by Collett Smart, edited and produced by Alec Green, imaging by Lucy Weil, and social media by Beth Rivers.